We are all familiar with the present-day ecological crisis. We live in a time of global warming, threat of water pollution, food shortages. The list is endless. We could ask ourselves if the Bible has anything to say to us in this crisis. There are those who give an emphatic no to this question. In fact, they would go so far as to say that the Bible has contributed to the crisis by giving the impression that humans are the be-all and end-all of creation. As we shall see, this is a very narrow interpretation of the Bible itself. The truer understanding of the Bible sees it as one part only of God's revelation of God's self, the book of words. For many centuries, Christians believed that God revealed God's self in two books, the book of words, but also the book of works. The revelation of God is to be seen in creation, as it is in the Bible. In recent centuries, there was a tendency to split the two, and to see God as revealed only in the Bible, while creation was looked on as the domain of science. In this first section of the CD, we will consider the background of these two books of God, and in later sections see how they interact with each other. Let us consider first then God's book of works. Our understanding of it is so much greater now because of the great discoveries of science. We will see as we go on that there is no dichotomy between science and religion, contrary to what many believe. In recent years, we have come to know planet Earth as a whole. That beautiful blue gem which astronauts have seen from space and which is our precious home. It is very fragile, and we are at the moment in danger of drowning it in waste. We know now that the universe is very old, contrary to what was believed in the past, and that we as humans are only newcomers in it. We could number crunch by talking about the 13.7 billion years ago of the flaring forth of the universe. 4.5 billion years ago, the Sun and the planets and Earth were formed. 700 million years ago, you had the first multicellular animal. Only 1.5 million years ago, you have Homo erectus, our remote ancestor. It is interesting to see the time of the Bible story within a more universal timeline. For instance, just to take a few examples, 700,000 years ago you had the brown bears emerging, 650,000 years ago wolves, 200,000 years ago archaic Homo sapiens, our more immediate ancestor, and then 40,000 years ago modern Homo sapiens, our very immediate ancestor. 1,200,000 years ago dogs were tamed by this Homo sapiens, and 8,800 years ago cattle were tamed. And then when you look at the Exodus story in the Bible, that was said to have taken place 1,200 years before the time of Christ. That would be around about 3,000 years ago. So the story of the Bible is very, very, very recent in comparison with the story of the earth. The beautiful world we live in manifests God's works then. A great environmentalist, Thomas Ferry, would go so far as to say that we have such a beautiful idea of God because of the beautiful world we live in. We share this world with other creatures. It is only in very recent centuries that we have come to realize the great diversity of creatures with whom we share the world, from the great and small animals that we see in this picture, to the tiniest bacteria that we cannot even see with the naked eye. Each species is unique and took millions of years to evolve. And unfortunately, we are at present busy wiping out many species because of our destruction of their habitats, because of pollution, and lack of understanding of their worth. We partake of the fruits of the earth with all the other species. We partake of the grain and the fruits like grapes, pomegranates, olives. These are fruits that are very common in the Middle East, the habitat of the Bible, if you like. If we grab too much, not only will there not be enough for humans, but all other species will suffer as well. So this beautiful book of God's works is increasingly polluted, largely because of human industrial enterprise in the past 150 years or so from the Industrial Revolution. So again the question, has the Bible anything to say to us today as we try to come to grips with what we are doing to the earth? We saw that as creation has been called God's book of works, so the Bible is God's book of words. An understanding of God has been revealed to us through the insights of one particular people, the people of Israel, through the story of their lives. When we come to look at the text of the Bible, we need to consider not just what the words themselves say, but where they come from. What is the world behind the text that gave rise to it in the first place? We need to do this so that we can understand what the text is actually saying to us. Our world is the world before the text. We have different questions to put to the text of the Bible from our ancestors. And so the world behind the text tells the story of the people of Israel in their relationship with God, with their world, and with one another. They lived out their history in the tiny land on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean, a land bordered by sea to the west and desert to the east, a land which was beset by powerful neighbours throughout all of its history. To the north, many different empires arose between the areas of the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, and to the south you had the land of Egypt. And very often, as with all superpowers, they tended to go for one another, and the land of Palestine, as a tiny strip between the sea and the desert, was very often the stamping ground of their armies. The different sections of the Bible were written at different times throughout that history and reflect the concerns of the times in which they were written. Each age interprets it in its own way. The historical and political implications of the times affected what was written. This is true for the world before the text also, our world. A recent document from Rome called The Interpretation of the Bible in the Church says, "The interpretation of a text is always dependent on the mindset and concerns of its readers. Readers give privileged attention to some aspects and without even being aware of it, neglect others. Every age brings the mindset of its own time to the interpretation of the Bible." The document goes on to outline two particular ways of interpreting the Bible, which have helped us to come to a deeper understanding of the text today: feminist theology and liberation theology. Feminist theology shows women looking at the text of the Bible with new eyes, thinking outside the box, thinking in new ways about what is present in the Bible, seeing the world out of which it was written, and seeing the place, or lack of place, of women in it. And then liberation theology looks at the Bible from the context of the South American peoples and their experience of poverty, and they look at the Bible with the eyes that will help them to come to grips with their life. I would add creation theology to these two. And so today, reading the Bible through the lens of creation theology can not only give us new insights into the Bible itself, but can also give us clues about what we need to do now to relate better to the beautiful world which is God's book of works. Further sections of this CD will explore ways in which we can do this.